Oh, the St. Louis Rams. Excuse me, going forward, they're going to be the Los Angeles Rams. This is one of these teams that every year you want to sit there and buy into this bullshit that they're talented, that they're on the cusp, they're ready for a breakthrough, and dot, dot, dot. And then the season actually happens, and they're just fucking mediocre. That's pretty much described the St. Louis Rams the past 4 years under Jeff Fisher, and probably will describe the Los Angeles Rams under Jeff Fisher in 2016, or God forbid if he's allowed to coach them beyond that season. I mean, a team that for years people have been praising them in the media, talking about how much of a winner they were in the whole RG3 deal. Yeah, except for the problem is in that same 4-year span that the Rams have had as the Redskins in terms of being able to figure out who won or lost that trade. You could argue maybe in theory because of some of the players that were acquired with the picks that they got from the RG3 trade that naturally the Rams won the deal. The problem is, though, is that in that same 4-year stretch, the Rams have made the playoffs 0 times, and the Redskins have made the playoffs twice. Twice, mind you, with RG3 as a rookie in 2012, and then in 2015 with a 4th-round pick from that same 2012 draft in Kirk Cousins. So who really won that deal? And how are the St. Louis Rams getting praised for their trolling of the Redskins and sending out the 6 players acquired from that deal for the coin toss? Who the fuck cares? The Rams were 7-9. The Redskins finished this year with a winning record and made the playoffs for the second time in 4 years. And people want to talk about the Redskins being a shitty organization, including me sometimes. What the hell am I talking about? This Rams team. Another year, another non-winning season, 7-9. 3rd in the NFC West, and they ended up with the number 15 overall pick in the 2016 NFL Draft. You know, what's there to praise about this team? And this is an organization. You sit there and talk about it, and we come up with all these bullshit reasons why they should be better than they frankly really are. And that's the truth of the matter. So what actually went well for this Rams organization in 2015, you know, instead of just being negative the entire time. Let's focus on the positives. Let's start off with Aaron Donald, my dude. And I find it funny. I saw recently on Twitter, people were asking about who is your favorite draft prospect to ever scout. Now, do you ask me the question? There were 2 guys, and will always be 2 guys. It'll be Randy Moss in 1998 and Brian Urlacher in 2000. Other guys include LaDainian Tomlinson in 2001. And yes, Aaron Donald is a part of that list as well. There's no question about going back to 99. It was Javon Curse. I mean, I'll have those couple of dudes every single draft. Usually when I got those dudes that I got that much of a man crush on, usually they perform, usually they produce, every once in a while they don't. But Aaron Donald I was huge on. But I find it funny how everybody's talking about Aaron Donald as their fucking favorite prospect of all time. You talk about a bunch of revisionist history bullshit. I was consistently and solidly in the Aaron Donald bandwagon as a top 10 pick where people were projecting him to be a 2nd or 3rd round pick in that 2014 draft. It shows you what a lot of the NFL draft media doesn't fucking know and doesn't get. And the fact that Aaron Donald was even allowed to drop to the 13th overall pick for the Rams in 2014 is a damn joke and a half, and it shows you just how not good at their job several front offices are, including the St. Louis Rams, because can you believe they took Greg Robinson 11 picks before Aaron Donald? They were lucky to get Donald at number 13. My goodness, Aaron Donald, what a freaking beast. The argument going forward, because this guy's so goddamn good and so goddamn dominant, is who would you rather have, J.J. Watt or Aaron Donald? And there are times where I think because of the position that he plays and the scheme that he plays in and what he does, that I might rather have Aaron Donald and J.J. Watt. And best believe that is saying something. That's how good Aaron Donald is. That's how dominant Aaron Donald is. That's how much of a fucking force Aaron Donald is. Incredible. And speaking of forces now and for the future, you got to look at Todd Gurley. The Rams organization took a gamble. They said this is an incredibly talented player, a once-in-a-decade perhaps running back. Even with the torn ACL, we're going to spend the 10th overall pick on him. And by God, did they make the right decision. Once Gurley hit the field, he was that business. He was the real deal. Finished 3rd in the league in rushing yards, and he missed a few games to start the season. When he had no real help on the offensive end of the ball at all. Adrian Peterson had some help on offense. Doug Martin had some help on offense. What the fuck did Todd Gurley have? Exactly. Just incredible. So you've got a future building block on defense, an Aaron Donald that any team would die to have, and perhaps a future building block on offense that perhaps any team would die to have. So the cupboard's not completely bare. And to be fair to the Rams, they have those moments, and this is what's so frustrating about them as an organization, as a team to watch, is they have those games, man, where you sit there and you're like, this team is good. And they could be pretty good. They beat Seattle twice. They beat Arizona. They handled business in their division for the most part. They went 4-2 in the NFC West. That's not chump shit. I mean, in 4 games with Seattle and Arizona, they went 3-1. You would think that if you could beat those 2 teams that both made the playoffs, if you could beat those 2 teams, Seattle twice and Arizona once, that should at least lead to a 10 or 11 win season, going 4-2 in your division. Not the Rams, though. Not the Rams. And ultimately, I guess at the end of the day, for the organization, they've been pining for Los Angeles for years. Owner Stan Kroenke most certainly has been pining to go to the LA area for years, and they finally got their wish. There's no more uncertainty for the organization. That cloud's not hanging over their head anymore. They got it done. At the end of the day, this organization got it done, and they're moving to LA for 2016 and going forward. Whether that ultimately long-term ends up to be a good decision or not, we'll see. You know, if you're complaining about the St. Louis market didn't really support the Rams, and there's maybe an argument to be made about that, especially from a financial standpoint, what makes you think long-term LA is going to? You might be able to stumble into some support just because of the size of that metro area. Well, we'll see. But they got it done, and that was important for that organization because they had a hard on for it, and they got it done. But a lot of other shit didn't go well for them, especially offensively. 29th in points scored, 32nd in passing yards, 32nd in total yards. I mean, their acquisition of Nick Foles did not go well. Obviously, moving on for Sam Bradford didn't really hurt him either. I mean, they just were what they were. But, you know, they traded for Nick Foles. The good thing about it is they got some better draft picks out of the Eagles for the 15 and 16 draft because of that trade. But, you know, Nick Foles was given an opportunity and he sucked. He sucked very badly. And, you know, when you look at it, this is a team that really shot itself in the foot because they should have been 10-6 this year. You can't lose games to teams like San Francisco and Baltimore and Chicago. If you want to make the playoffs, that just can't happen. Chicago, Baltimore, and San Francisco. The Rams got blown out by the Bears. That's what makes it just even worse. I mean, if they win those 3 games, the St. Louis Rams are a 10-6 team, and they might have made the playoffs. And the whole trajectory of the organization has changed immensely. But because of the failures of Nick Foles, because of the suck in a lot of other areas on offense, not named Todd Gurley, or the sometimes bursts that we get out of Tavon Austin, because this organization still can't figure out how to effectively utilize him after 3 fucking years, this team loses to teams like Chicago, Baltimore, and San Francisco, and they're sitting at 7-9 instead of trying to figure out how to win games in the playoffs. They're still trying to figure out how to get to the playoffs. This team had 5 of their 9 losses where they scored 14 or fewer points. That's just bush. You're not going anywhere in the NFL if you can't score more than 14 freaking points. I mean, that's ridiculous. Including, they had 5 games total where they scored 10 or less points. I mean, even if you don't have much on offense, to score 10 points or less 5 different times in a 16-game season is absolutely pathetic. Pathetic. You can talk about the firing of the offensive coordinator, but it gets to a point in time after 4 years, why the hell haven't you fired the fucking head coach and the general manager? Because they've played a big part in the suckfest that has been the Rams offense for the past 4 years in St. Louis and will probably be a part of another suckfest of offense in Los Angeles in 2016. So now, with this organization, heading into year 5 of the Les Snead, Jeff Fisher experience, what are their organizational priorities? Well, number 1 was to get the LA deal done, and they got that done. So now they can move the fuck on from it. But they've got some important decisions to make. You've got some pending free agents like Janoris Jenkins and Trumaine Johnson, Mark Barron, Nick Fairley. You know, those are some guys on their defense that they've got to figure out whether they want to plunk money down into them or they're ready to move on from them. Especially importantly, the question surrounding guys like Janoris Jenkins and Trumaine Johnson. They don't have a lot of depth behind those guys. Those are guys that came out of that 2012 draft class. You know, the fact that you even let them get to this point in free agency seems kind of ridiculous. Maybe you should have extended them before this past season. But now you sit here and you might have to make a decision. You might only be able to retain one. You might be able to retain both of them, but you're just as likely to lose both of them. And then what the hell do you do? And then internally as an organization, they got to look at some major decisions too, because to me, part of the key to being successful in the NFL is finding talented players and then keeping those talented players in the fold as long as possible, because ultimately it's more beneficial to your organization and is cheaper in the long term. So you've got Michael Brockers, who's now 4 years into his rookie contract. Next year's his last year. The Rams need to figure out if they're going to get a deal done with him. And if they do want to get a deal done with him, they need to get it done sooner rather than later. Guys from the 2013 draft, now that they're 3 years in, those guys can be re-signed. Tavon Austin, Alec Ogletree. It would behoove this organization to try and re-sign them now. Austin shouldn't cost you the farm. Ogletree is coming off of an injury. It might be a good time to re-sign these guys and lock them up for another 4 or 5 years as you make sure that you get them throughout the peak of their NFL career as they enter their mid to late 20s. That's what good organizations do. But then we're talking about the Rams. They still need to find a quarterback. After all those years, I still can't believe this dumbass organization never drafted Sam Bradford #1 overall to begin with. That's where the problems really started. But then they traded for Nick Foles, and he's not the answer. So they're still looking for a quarterback. And that's the truth of the matter. And they need to find that quarterback in the draft, and they just flat out need to improve this offense via the draft because their offense absolutely fucking stinks. Now, sure, defensively, they have some needs. They could use some depth on the defensive line. You could always say that, especially defensive end, because at some point in time, Chris Long's contract might be prohibitive to them keeping him long-term, and they might want to have somebody on the opposite side of Robert Quinn that's ready to step up at some point in time. They can use some depth in the secondary, especially at corner. This position might be a little more valued if Jenkins and or Johnson ends up leaving via free agency. I still think they can use a playmaker in the secondary at safety. But in general, by and large, this has to be an offense-driven draft. They have to find a quarterback. Now, based off of where they're picking at number 15, is that quarterback there at that moment? I don't know that it is. I don't know that it isn't either. But that's the number one need. But right along with that number one need is the other number one need, if you would say 1B. That would be the wide receiver position. They get nothing out of their guys out of the outside. And it causes part of the problems of why they can't get more out of Tavon Austin, not to mention all the ridiculous schematics of how they utilize and deploy Tavon Austin. But they need a number one dude. As bad as they need a quarterback, they need a number one wide receiver. Can you believe a team that once had Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt, 2 borderline Hall of Famers, now they're throwing out their guys like Kenny Britt. No offense, but I mean, let's say Kenny fucking Britt. They need wide receiver help in a bad way. And you can make an argument that it would behoove them to double dip at that position in this draft, even if it comes on day 2, rounds 2 and 3, to find 2 guys to play on the outside because that's how bad their wide receivers stink. They could look at the tight end position, and again, that might behoove them to do that as well. Maybe even on day 2 of the draft, because this is a team that after the 2012 season went into free agency, wanted to get something out of that tight end position. They wanted to sign somebody. The Tennessee Titans let Jared Cook go. The Rams signed Jared Cook. The Titans signed Delaney Walker in that same offseason. The Titans haven't looked back, and the Rams probably look back all the time and been like, man, I wish we would have gotten Delaney Walker because he proved to be better. This team needs something at tight end too. I mean, they just, other than Todd Gurley in certain areas of the offensive line, and maybe even they could improve some areas of their offensive line, but I think their offensive line got better in 2015. They need skill. They need athleticism. They need talent on the outside. They need talent at tight end. And God forbid, most importantly, they need talent at quarterback. If this Rams organization thinks that Sean Mannion is going to be their long-term answer at quarterback, their 3rd-round pick from 2015, I don't know what they're smoking, but please pass some of that ganja to me. They have to find their long-term quarterback in this draft, and they must find some athletic pieces on the outside that can create something in the passing game, because otherwise teams in 2016 are just going to load 9 people in the box, not 8 people. They're just going to graduate straight to 9 people in the box every single play and force you to beat them with the passing game. Because they're not going to want Todd Gurley to beat them, because they know if they don't do more, Todd Gurley can beat them. But they damn sure good and well know that if the Rams don't do anything, their passing game is never, ever going to beat you.